So, welcome to part 2. You join me in the field and you can see all these lovely solar panels behind me. I'm going to take you through how we've connected all these up, what these are, how much they're producing, and show you how it all feeds back into that plant room that you saw in part 1. So if you joined us here the first time for part 2 and you haven't seen part 1, go back, watch part 1, then come and join us again and we'll show you this second part, because this part is going to be very, very interesting and is my favourite bit. Okay, let's go back to about a year ago now when we started to fit all this, and it seems like such a fond memory and it seems such a long time ago, but let's go back and show you a little bit about how all this was installed. Hi everybody, welcome to another YouTube video and welcome to Coolgaith up in Penrith in Cumbria. It's a cold day and it is actually Valentine's Day today, so we've taken all of the guys away from their partners, which we are not in the good books about, but let me show you this beautiful system that we're starting, that we're all in love with. It's a bit cheesy that. So like any project, this is the crucial bit. This is the initial setup before we get any panels on. So you can see either side of me here, if we walk backwards, we've got 2 sets of panel mounting systems. We've got 52 panels in one long row along the bottom here, and then 52 above that running along the top. So 104 panels on that side, and exactly the same on this side. So 52 along the bottom, 52 along the top, 104 there. That's 208 panels. This is one of our biggest jobs to date, and it's an experience and we're enjoying doing it. All these panels feed back to a solar edge inverter, or 2 solar edge inverters. We've got 2 30 kilowatt solar edge inverters up at the house, and I believe there's about 84 kilowatt peak of solar panels installed. So we've got 208 415 watt solar panels, all blacks. We'll show you those in a minute. So yeah, let's have a closer look. So, like I mentioned, on this project we've got 208 panels. They are these Perlite 415s, which if you've seen some other videos on the channel, you know we like the Perlite 415s. So I've just done the maths, that's 86.32 kilowatts of solar PV on this project, so it's a biggie. But this customer is currently spending about £2,500 a month on electricity, so we've got a lot of work to do to get as much of that consumption reduced as possible. So 208 of these, all blacks, and yeah, they're one of our favourite panels. They just look absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to show you what they look like when they're on these mounting structures. So we're here at this back set of rails, or back set of mountings, and you can see we've got 4 rails leading up. So 2 of these rails are for the bottom row and the other 2 are for the top row. You can see Bill there is tightening the T-bolts that fix these rails to these uprights here. So these uprights form the mounting structure to the ground. And you can see here we've got a big ground screw that holds this post in place to keep it anchored to the ground. Because obviously when we've got all these panels on, there will be quite a lot of area there for the wind to grab hold of. But with all these anchors in and all of them joined together with the rails, communally and collectively, that forms a really solid structure. So let's take a little closer look at one of these posts. So we can see here we've got these really large 3 grub screws that are holding this post in place. The reason we quite like this sun fixing system is that once these anchors are in and we've got this post in place, we've actually got some adjustment on the height here. So the ground mount systems are a little bit tricky to level, just because the ground, you haven't got a completely flat area unless you grade it and you prepare it. But most of the time, there's a lot of money in doing that, and it's not worth it if you can have this sort of flexible system. So when we've got this type of system, we can ping a laser level all the way around, and then that allows us to adjust the height of this mounting structure and then tighten them in place. So the height of this one might be slightly different to the next one and the one before it, but this gives us loads of flexibility there. So that's why we quite like this sun fixing system. So we're cracking on. Currently we're fixing all the rail to this structure, and it's quite important that we do all this to the design that Sun Fixings have provided, and part of that design is using the two different types of couplers. So we've got this coupler here which allows us to butt the rails up to each other without any gap, so sort of like a standard coupler. And then we've got this one here, which is, I suppose it might be like a running coupler, or we call them sliders, which has two fixed torpedo bolts, which means that it doesn't necessarily fit tight to this, it allows a little bit of slide. So I'll see if I can do it. They can be a little bit tricky to get in, but it allows a little bit of slide. So as the aluminium expands and contracts, the structure can effectively breathe a little bit, so that allows a little bit of slide. There's only 2 rows or 2 sections of the full system that has this slide, but it's still stuck fast. So this side here will tighten onto the rail, and this other side will still be tight on. It's not going to come out, but it just allows a little bit of flex on the rail, a little bit of expansion and contraction. So we've kind of been describing it as allowing the system to breathe a little bit as the temperature changes. So yeah, we're going to the drawing and we're installing these couplers now. So let's have a little close-up of what's going on here in these 2 arrays. So we've got 104 panels at this side and then 104 at the front side. They're made up of 2 rows of 52 panels. These are the Perlite 415 watt panels, and they have got solar edge optimization every 2 panels. So they're in basically banks of 2 for the solar edge optimizers. We've used the Sun Fixings ground mount anchors, so they're driven, so that if you can see just down here, we've got these big poles here that are screwed into the ground. That then reveals a slot at the top, which then the top part of the anchor goes in, and then we've got these big grub screws here that tighten onto this pole and keep it in position. That's then galv sprayed around to stop all the bolts rusting and kind of coming loose. So all these bolts here have been galv sprayed throughout the entire installation. We then mount these sections of large bits of rail all the way along, and we've got an end clamp here, and then we've got mid clamps all the way along there as well, and that's what clamps the panels down to this ground mounted system. We've then got exactly the same above for the next row of 52, and that just runs all the way down to the end. Now I have to admit, this was very, very painful getting all of these as level as we could and as square as we could, because we haven't got an edge of a roof, we haven't got kind of anything to really measure from. So we have to use laser levels and string lines and lots of other wild and wonderful things to get these level, but we achieved it and we've got it, which was really good. We've then got these end caps on here because the edges of this rail is really sharp, so we didn't want to hurt anybody with it, rub past these and maybe cut their arm or anything. So yeah, really good. So what we'll do is we'll go down the back of this front array so we can just show you some of the bits and bobs there. So for certain sections of this system, we've got these tension wires, and this basically just helps to keep it all square, because you can imagine if you've got just lots and lots of straight down poles, then if it all starts to tip, it can all be like a big domino. So this really helps to pull everything together and keep it all really tight. We've got the optimizers mounted so they're accessible underneath, and then what we've got is we've got some interconnection ducts which bring through our bonding and our DC cables from the front array just over there as well. But that just continues on and on and on all the way down to the end of the field. But there's one other part that I want to show you along here, and we've got a bit of like a slip joint. So when we were planning to do this, I never even thought about needing this until I saw on the drawings that it had this gap. So this is basically a bit of a slip, like an expansion or a slip joint. And what it's got a coupler, but one side of the coupler isn't tight, and it's basically got a slipping ring in it. So that what can happen is, if there's a bit of wobble, instead of it being a solid structure that will fight that wobble, it just allows a little bit of movement in between this, and it allows for a bit of expansion of the metal and all sorts. So there's this slip joint all the way up the middle there. I think it's, yeah, and then on the other side you can see it's in the same position there. I think there's one more along there. So there's 2 of these slip joints per array, if you like, which I found quite interesting really doing it, because I thought, well, that just gives you that little bit of wiggle room, because we all know metal expands and contracts. So that was quite interesting. This is, like I say, Sun Fixing's system, and it was really, really good to install. I really enjoyed it, and it's just been doing crazy amounts of generation, which is good. And my favourite ever panel as well, the Perlite 415, just looks so good. But that's really cool. I just want to show you some isolators now, so we'll head down the back of this install and just show you what we've done around the back of here. Okay, so what we wanted to do when we're down here is we wanted to provide some local isolation for each row of panels. So we've got 1 row along the top, 1 row along the bottom. So then we've got an isolator per row on that. That will allow us to isolate locally down here. There's the same again up at the house end, but that allows us to isolate locally these panels if we need to change an optimizer or work on the cabling or something else like that. So yeah, that's what we've got here. We've got the same on the front set of panels as well. It means we've got that local isolation, and it's nice and easy to work on this system. Okay, let's take a look at the SolarEdge app. And this SolarEdge app obviously shows what the solar's doing. We can have a look at the layout of the panels, but it'll also show us the self-consumption figures, a bit like the Sonnen one does, but I really like the SolarEdge app. This is slightly different to the one the customer has. The customer one is slightly more customer facing and has a few more bells and whistles, but this one's quite nice as a basic overview, and the information is the same across both apps. So we'll go through this now. So we can see along this top bar here, we've got 8.83 kilowatts being produced right now. So slight lag, but pretty much right now. We've got 9.05 kilowatts being used in the property. So at the minute we're buying in 220 watts, and that'll just be because the batteries are discharging the other amount of energy that is pretty much needed, but it's just the grid is just catching up a little bit on that as well. So the batteries are just trying to always meet that demand retrospectively. So we've got today the total amount of kilowatt hours that have been produced, so 33.87 kilowatt hours that have been produced to date. This month we've generated 3 megawatt hours, so 3,000 kilowatt hours. In a lifetime, it's generated 66,430 kilowatt hours. So there's a hell of a lot of power that this system has produced. So this moved down, we're on the day tabs. This is what's been going on today. The red is what we can see as consumption outside of the solar generation. So that's what's been purchased. And then we can see the blue there is the self-consumed power. So that'll be either through the battery, which majority of it will be because the solar isn't that good today, but you can see how it tries to track the solar generation as well. So the consumption as well. So when the consumption spikes, the self-consumption spikes because the battery has tried to shoot up and meet that power. So if we just have a look at yesterday though, for a full 24 hours of data, we can see here that we've got a bit of red consumption in the morning till the solar strikes up. So when the sun starts to rise earlier and earlier, then this generation will kick in earlier as well. But you can see there that it started to kick in around sort of 6 o'clock-ish, something like that. And it started to rise up and up and up, and you can see the blue there is self-consumption, so that's meeting the consumption pretty much bang on. And then we've got a bit of green that's shooting up and above the self-consumption because there's been a surplus amount of solar PV generated, and that has then going into the batteries. You can't see it going into the batteries here because the batteries aren't SolarEdge, they're Sonnen, but you can see that the production is higher than the consumption. If we have a look back up to those 2 bars, we can see that yesterday system production was 140 kilowatt hours. So we generated 140 kilowatt hours. 88% of that was self-consumed, so either directly by the site and by things being on, like these lights yesterday, all the cars charging, everything like that, or by putting it into the batteries and then the batteries discharging that later on. So it's being used basically. You can see there that we had 17.04 kilowatt hours, so 12%, are sent back to the grid. So that's the bits that the batteries missed when it was either fully charged or just when the battery was trying to ramp up to meet that consumption, that production. So there's always a little bit of that is missed. We move down consumption. So the house yesterday consumed 207 kilowatt hours, and 60% of the house's consumption came from the solar PV. So that 123.9 kilowatt hours was used by the house. That's meant that there was an import, even with this size system, of 40%, which is 84 kilowatt hours. So obviously as summer comes in, there'll be less and less import needed because there'll be less being used in the house, but also the solar generation will be better and will generate more and fill those batteries up quicker. If we move this timestamp along, so we can do week, month and year. So let's have a look at the year, but we'll do last year just because there's a bit more data there for us to look at. So you can see here that it is nearly a year since we installed it, because we were in March. We're in March now, I think, March now. And we can see here that it was April time that it was installed. So we're pretty much a full year through. So we've got a few different coloured bars here. We've got the green bars, which is the generation. We've got the blue bar, which is the self-production. We've got the red bar, which is the consumption, so effectively coming from the grid. And if we just check what we've got here, so on these two bars along the top, this will give us an overview of that full year. So we've got a system production for 2023 of 58.26 megawatt hours, so 58,260 kilowatt hours, which is just a huge amount of power. And we've impacted on that. Obviously we haven't got January, February, March in there, and it hasn't got a full month for April, but we've impacted about 46% of that power. So we've basically reduced it by about 50% without it having a full year's worth of data. We've then got the consumption amount. We've consumed 38.05 megawatt hours in the property, so that's just what the property has used. 70% of that power has come from the solar PV and batteries. So this is the actual one where we're showing impact, sorry, not the previous one. The previous one is just the amount that we've used against the amount of exported. So this one here is the consumption. So the house has used 38,000 kilowatt hours. 70% of that consumption has come from the solar and the battery. So we've reduced that property's import power by 70%, because before this, they would have used exactly the same amount of power, but it wouldn't have come from a renewable source like the panels and via the batteries. So we have basically reduced their bill for this month by 70% with having this system in, which is a really healthy amount. So we've supplied this property, without it being a full year, 26,730 megawatt hours that they have used. So if we look on the bar above, the green one, they have exported 31,000 kilowatt hours of that power. So you can see in the bar chart below, the summer months, they're exporting a lot of power, which they're also earning income from. So the money from the export is also going against what they've imported for that year. So they're earning income from that exported power as well. So it says here on the horizontal bar chart for the consumption that they've got an import of 30%. So that total consumption of 38,000, they have imported 30% of that. So they've basically paid for 30% of the power that they've used in the property, but they've self-generated 70% of it. So there's a hell of a lot of power that's come from our system. If we have a look at how we're getting on in 2024, obviously we've only got the worst months of the year to compare it against at the minute. So this is showing that the consumption is 15,000 kilowatt hours at the beginning of this year, and they have imported 61%. But we've still had about a 40% impact on the full system consumption, which is really good considering we're in the worst part of the year. So we're now going into the brighter parts of the year, so I can quite well see that these figures will just improve a bit like they have done on the 2023 figures. So that's good. So we'll move down. This is where we can compare the generation. So we can do, let's compare, let's leave it on month. So we've got two colours here. We've got 2023 and 2024. So this is really handy because you can have a look at, basically as of next month, we can start to compare what we generated this time last year to what we generated in this time this year, if you like. So we can compare it. So if there's a really substantial drop, it might alert you to there's been a problem with the panels. They might need cleaning, there might be some damaged panels, and it'll maybe prompt you to have a look at that. As the years go on, there'll be even more colours and even more bars, so you've got more data to compare. If we go to the panel layout, which is loading now, here we go. This just really puts into perspective the amount of panels we've got here. Let's move it off daily, let's put it onto yearly, so we can view the amount that these panels have produced per timestamp. So we'll do yearly, just so that we've got that information. The information is a little bit larger in output. So we can see here, if I zoom in just on a little section, firstly, we haven't got any really black panels on here. The darker the colour, the lesser the generation compared to its neighbours. So we can see that all these figures are slightly different. So we've got on this back row 40 kilowatt hours for the year so far, pretty much across the board, some 39s. Then the row in front, which will be the bottom set of panels, they're slightly less, which is to be expected because there's probably a slight shading impact there from the row in front, and just that they're a lower panel, and they are 38.4, but they're all pretty much the same. They'll never be identical, but they're all pretty much the same. We've then got the panels along the top of the front row and the top and the bottom of the front row as well. So you can see there that quite quickly we can have a look and go, actually, that one there's 36, and that one they're 38. But that's over a year, so there's only really like 2 kilowatt hours over the 3 months of this year that they're differing, so there's hardly anything. But you can compare that over different months, and this is really handy if there is a problem. We can actually start breaking down the timestamp to actually go, oh, it probably happened in January because all the other time before that it was okay, and then something happened in January and it's now showing as a darker panel. But that's just a really quick reference for it to have a look at the scale of that system and go, okay, they all look okay. These panels are obviously in a field, so you can walk past them, you can clean them easily. But if you imagine this was on your factory building, or just a big house, for example, maybe not to this scale, it'd be very hard to actually see what those panels are doing. With this, we can look at it, you can look at it, SolarEdge can look at it, and actually make sure that everything looks to be generating properly. And this is a big part that people don't understand about SolarEdge. They think that it's all about shading and it's all about optimizing the generation, which it is, but it's about the level of information that we can get by not having to visit site. We're all busy, and we don't want to charge to come out to investigate a potential problem for there not to be a problem. We want you to make as much money from having this system as possible. And so if we can quickly look at this and click onto there and then start having a look at some of the panel information, the outputs and what have you, and even just create a case for SolarEdge to look at it, we can usually identify if there is a problem and what the problem might be before even coming to site. So that for me is a massive part of why SolarEdge is worth it. I think that's pretty much the entirety of what we can see on this system. So it gives us a really good overview of how the system's performing. If there is any problems, you can log into this on the dashboard online as well on your laptop and view it from anywhere in the world. So if you're away on holiday, you can still see how much your solar is producing, which is really cool. Okay, well done, you've made it. So I'm going to reveal now what we've installed, the cost of it, and roughly how long it took us to do this full installation from first day till commissioning it, really. So this is what we've installed. This is how much it's cost for the full project. And this is how long it took us. So that'll hopefully provide a guide to you if you've got a job of this scale. But equally, if you've not got a job of this scale, then it's not going to cost any more than that. So hopefully that provides you with a bit of an insight, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Okay, that's us done. This is Culgaith wrapped up. It's been a very interesting job. I've really enjoyed it. We've learned a lot on it, and it's nice to come back nearly a year later to see that it's making such a huge impact on this property's electricity bill. It might not be covering absolutely every watt that they're using, but I think it was around a 70% reduction in their energy bill. That is huge, and that has had a real impact on what they'll be paying. So I'm really, really happy about that. We've had to retreat from the field because the weather has turned, but thank you very much for watching. One thing that you can guarantee up here in Coolgate is that they've got a big solar PV system and the weather is always freezing cold. So I'm going to jump in the van now, but thanks very much for watching. Really appreciate it. Please like, subscribe and all that jazz, and we'll see you on the next video.